I was just saying the remarkable scenes we saw just a few weeks ago with the hostages release was a real moment for Israel, for the world, for Donald Trump as well. It does seem to me now it's looking a little bit more tense, accusations flying across both sides of breaking the ceasefire. Can you bring us up to speed with the latest, and are you confident that this delicate peace is going to hold?
Well, right now, Israel's trying to get Hamas to uphold its side of phase one of the ceasefire. It is still holding on to 13 bodies of hostages it murdered, and we know it's playing games. Just yesterday, Israel released shocking drone footage of Hamas terrorists burying body parts and then digging them back up again to hand them over to the Red Cross. I mean, truly, this is psychopath behavior. Not only are they holding on to the hostages, they're also still shooting at Israeli soldiers. We've lost 3 men in the Gaza Strip who have been killed by Hamas's violations of the ceasefire. So Israel has responded. It's responded with precision strikes against Hamas military targets, taking out dozens of Hamas terrorists, including some who took part in the October 7th massacre. And now the message is very clear. We need all of the bodies of the murdered hostages back, and then we have to move to phase 2, in which Hamas will agree to leave power and demilitarize. But that's not going to happen without massive global pressure on Hamas to admit that the game's over.
Do you think they are playing games, or they just don't want to admit they actually don't know where these... It's a horrible thing to have to discuss, but they just don't know where these bodies are?
Hamas is playing games. That's what we saw with the macabre spectacle yesterday of taking body parts, burying them, and then revealing them again for the Red Cross. We know that they're trying to buy time. And the reason Hamas is trying to buy time is it doesn't want to move to phase 2 of the ceasefire, because phase 2 of the ceasefire is effectively Hamas's surrender. It's Hamas relinquishing power, laying down its arms, and Hamas doesn't want that. It's a jihadi army whose reason for existing is to continue waging jihad until Israel is destroyed. Now, Harry, let me tell you something even more disturbing. A new Palestinian poll dropped yesterday showing that Hamas has become more popular since the October 7th massacre. It's by far the most popular Palestinian political party. It would win a landslide in presidential elections, and a third of Palestinians say that their support for Hamas has increased since the massacre. So unfortunately, if Hamas thinks that declaring and waging this war has made it stronger, it's going to be in no rush to admit defeat in this war and let everyone move on.
Wasn't that one of the major problems with the, I think it was Douglas Murray that described this, the deal as unpalatable and naive, in the fact that actually this was kind of always going to happen. The biggest flaw in the Trump-Witkoff-Kushner terms is when you get about a third way down that 20-point plan, and it suddenly says Hamas are going to put their guns away and march off into the sunset and not be prosecuted for their crimes or not be held accountable for it. And a lot of people said, well, how the hell is that ever going to happen? Not least, it's incredibly uncomfortable for the Israeli side. But as you say so clearly there, these guys are not just going to walk away peacefully.
You're right. No one expects Hamas to waltz into the sunset.
So was it naive to sign? Was it naive? My point being, I suppose, was it naive to sign it?
That's not a flaw in the Trump plan. That's the genius of the Trump plan. Because previously, every ceasefire deal let Hamas hold on to hostages as insurance for a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza so they could plot the next October 7th. The Trump deal forced Hamas to give up the hostages and lets Israel hold on to half of Gaza as insurance that Hamas will relinquish power in the other half of Gaza. The deal says the hostages out first, and then we'll talk about the day after. And it's clear, Hamas does not want to demilitarize. It does not want to relinquish power. It certainly doesn't want to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip. And that is why we need global pressure on Hamas's patrons, its state sponsors, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, to tell it, game over. If you do not agree to lay down your arms, you are completely on your own. We're not going to support you anymore. Those were the state sponsors that told Hamas they had to free the hostages. They need to tell Hamas now to lay down its arms.
Are you confident they are going to do that? It strikes me as the sort of the eye of Donald Trump is now. Well, he's in Asia now. He immediately off the back of the hostages being released, he was back into speaking with Putin, trying to bring Putin to the table. There was talk of a Budapest summit. You know, he's got chaos at home with the government shutdown that's still rumbling on and coming up for a month now. Are you worried that, you know, are you worried that Donald Trump's sort of attention span is moved on, and this is why, you know, Hamas and co are slightly taking the mickey?
Now, I don't think it's to do with President Trump's attention span. In fact, he really wants to get this done because he wants to open the door to normalization agreements between Israel and Arab countries. Let that be his legacy and get the Nobel Prize. I'm concerned because most countries, so in hoc to Qatari and Turkish influence, they are not using any of their leverage to put pressure on Hamas's state sponsors to end this war. But that is the only way that this war is going to end for good, if Hamas is completely isolated. This war will not end for good if Hamas feels that countries like the UK, Canada, France are giving it backing by recognizing a non-existent Palestinian state. Hamas will be forced to lay down its arms if its patrons say they won't support it anymore. But so far, we haven't heard that from Qatar and Turkey, and that's why I'm doing all the rounds of the interview studio saying that's where policymakers' pressure needs to be.
All right, well, we'll make sure we put that up in lights for you. How is it playing out in Israel? Obviously, Netanyahu's a divisive figure doesn't even begin to cover it, but if you do end up in a sort of horrible stalemate where we are currently seem to be now, stuck between phase 1 and phase 2 of the peace plan, yes, the hostages, the living hostages, I should say, sorry, are home, and that, you know, that can only be welcomed. But if you get stuck in the sort of limbo of, you know, still occupying half of Gaza, as you say, having pop shots taken at IDF troops by Hamas, and Gaza slipping into factional chaos, shooting each other in the streets, how is that going to play out for the Israeli government? Be welcomed, but if you get stuck in the sort of limbo of, you know, still occupying half of Gaza, as you say, having pop shots taken at IDF troops by Hamas, and Gaza slipping into factional chaos, shooting each other in the streets, how is that going to play out for the Israeli government?
You know, Israelis want to end this war. They want all the soldiers home, the reservists home, and to put this nightmare behind us. But you asked before about naivety. No one in Israel is naive about Hamas. Everyone understands that unless Hamas is forced to step down and relinquish its weapons, there will be a next time, and it will be worse, and it will be worse because Hamas will feel vindicated. So even the big protest movement in Israel that was calling to bring the hostages home said first bring the hostages home and we'll worry about Hamas later. Israelis know that this may be a long battle because Hamas is ideologically, fanatically sworn to Israel's destruction, but there is a proposal, a plan that the whole world has agreed to now, the Donald Trump peace plan. Israel says yes to all 20 points, and Israel is hoping that other countries will come on board and implement it and pressure Hamas so that this war can end without another recourse to fighting. I think the Prime Minister himself would really much rather put this behind him. He would quite like to get a normalization agreement with Indonesia or Saudi Arabia and use that as an achievement running into the next election.
And how are relations between the two men themselves? Obviously, there was a remarkable scene at the White House when President Trump almost sort of ordered Netanyahu to pick up the phone and apologise to the Qataris as he was trying to unlock that peace accord. There's been multiple well-sourced reports in the US media that they've had some fairly lively conversations, to put it one way. Are relations there good? There was a sort of suggestion that Trump had lost his patience with Netanyahu and believed he'd gone too far in some aspects of pursuing Hamas.
You know, I think Netanyahu's recent visit to the White House was his fourth since President Trump was re-elected. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any other world leader has had so many visits, and the relationship.
Maybe Zelensky, really, but yeah, I take your point.
Maybe Zelensky, but it really is one of the closest relationships. And you know, when Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner joined an Israeli cabinet meeting, they said, "You drove a very hard bargain. We were climbing the wall sometimes, but you know, you were right to be very tough because Israel has its own security interests to protect." And I think there will be frank disagreements behind the scenes, but Israel and the US are completely in agreement. This has to end with Hamas's complete removal, or there will be a next time, and it will be worse. And neither Israel nor the United States want that. We want this war to be over and for the whole Middle East to move on.
And the final question, though, are you concerned about, I mean, I've seen it here, the sort of once traditional sort of relationship between Israel and the American right in this country was pretty rock solid. The younger generation and the sort of more online-driven right of the US, large parts of Donald Trump's support base, are openly questioning at best the military relationship with Israel and littered with some pretty horrific anti-Semitism at worst. That it's becoming more and more sort of noisy. Are you concerned that the longer-term relationships with Israel and the United States is in a little danger?
There is a lunatic anti-Semitic fringe on the American right, and major problems, I don't need to tell you, on the American left. It's a generational problem. You've got half of young Americans who say they support Hamas, not the Palestinians.
I mean, it makes
Hamas.
Yeah.
So I can only hope that, you know, cooler heads prevail and the older generation manages to talk some sense into the young'uns about why that relationship has historically been a pillar of America's foreign policy and security.
Eylon Levy, great thoughts as ever. Thank you for joining us and stay safe. Good night. Kim.